The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over Maplewood, a quaint town where everyone knew each other's names. The night was alive with laughter and chatter as Emily Carter, a vivacious woman in her late 20s, celebrated her birthday at the local bistro, the Olive Branch. Surrounded by friends, she radiated joy, her laughter ringing out like music. Jake, her husband, sat across from her, his heart swelling with love as he watched her animatedly recounting a humorous story about a mishap during their recent camping trip. "And then the raccoon stole our marshmallows. Can you believe it?" Emily giggled, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. "Only you could attract a raccoon like that," Jake replied, grinning. His hand reached across the table, intertwining with hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Next time, I'll keep the food locked up." The group erupted in laughter, the ambiance filled with warmth and camaraderie. As the evening wore on, the friends toasted to Emily's happiness, unaware that this would be the last time they would see her smile. Hours later, the laughter faded, and the bistro emptied, leaving behind echoes of joy and the lingering scent of rosemary and garlic. The following morning, the sun rose reluctantly, casting a muted light over the Carter household. Jake stirred awake, his brow furrowing as he turned to the empty side of the bed. "Em!" he called, his voice thick with sleep. No response. He rubbed his eyes, the remnants of the previous night's celebration still dancing in his mind, and swung his legs over the side of the bed. After searching the house and calling out her name with increasing urgency, he stepped outside, the cool morning air biting against his skin. "Emily!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the stillness of the neighborhood. Panic began to claw at his chest as he scanned the yard, searching for any sign of her. That's when he saw it, a small, delicate handkerchief, crumpled and stained with dark red spots, lying ominously on the grass. His heart raced as he approached it, kneeling down for a closer look. No, he whispered, fear gripping him as he reached out to pick it up. The moment his fingers brushed against the fabric, he knew that this was not just a simple accident. The sound of sirens pierced the heavy silence, approaching from a distance. Jake stood up, clutching the handkerchief tightly, a sense of dread washing over him. As the police car pulled up, he fought the urge to flee, knowing that he had to face whatever was coming. The door swung open, and Detective Thompson stepped out, his expression grave. "Jake Carter?" Thompson asked, his tone serious as he surveyed the scene. "Yeah, it's me," Jake replied, his voice trembling slightly. "Have you seen Emily?" "She didn't come home last night." Thompson's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer. "We need to talk about what you found here." He gestured to the handkerchief, and Jake's stomach dropped. I don't know how it got there. I didn't see her after the dinner. I swear." Jake's voice cracked, desperation spilling over. "Calm down," Thompson said, his tone softening slightly. "We're just trying to piece together what happened. Can you tell me about your last night together?" Jake swallowed hard, recalling the warmth of the bistro and the laughter of their friends. "We were at the Olive Branch, celebrating her birthday. She was happy. Really happy," he said, his voice trailing off as uncertainty began to creep in. "But we did have a fight a few days ago. It was nothing serious, just a misunderstanding." "Interesting," Thompson noted, jotting down notes in his small, worn notebook. "Did anyone else seem concerned about her? Any unusual behavior?" "No, she was fine," Jake insisted, feeling the weight of suspicion settle on his shoulders as the detective continued to scrutinize him. The tension in the air thickened, and whispers began to unfurl among the neighbors who had gathered outside, drawn by the commotion. As the detective continued his questioning, Jake felt a growing sense of helplessness. The world around him blurred into a haze of worry and confusion. He was losing Emily, and the thought was unbearable. With each passing moment, it became clearer that everything he cherished was slipping away, leaving only the chilling promise of what might come next. The sun hung low in the sky as Detective Thompson paced the small interrogation room, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Jake sat at the metal table, his hands trembling slightly as he fidgeted with the edge of his shirt. The weight of suspicion pressed heavily on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The detective, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, watched him closely. "Jake," Thompson began, his voice steady. "We need to talk about Emily's last few days. It's important. There are rumors circulating, and we can't ignore them." Jake's brow furrowed as he tried to process the detective's words. "Rumors? What rumors?" he asked, his voice rising slightly in pitch. The detective leaned in, his gaze piercing. "Your wife had a disagreement with someone. A friend of hers mentioned it. Sarah, right? What happened?" Jake's heart sank as he thought of Emily's best friend. "We had a fight," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it was nothing serious, just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Thompson's tone was skeptical. "Sarah said Emily was upset. She seemed worried. Did you threaten her in any way?" "No," Jake shot back, indignation flaring. "I would never hurt her. Emily meant everything to me. We just had a rough patch." The detective scribbled something in his notebook, his expression unyielding. "You need to understand, Jake. The more you deny things, the more suspicious you become. We found a blood-stained handkerchief in your yard. Can you explain how it got there?" "I don't know." Jake's voice cracked, his frustration boiling over. "I didn't see it until this morning. I swear, I didn't hurt her. I was looking for her all night. I thought she was out with friends." Thompson observed him with a calculating gaze, then changed the subject. "Sarah told us you two had a fight a few days before she disappeared. What was it about?" Jake hesitated, the memories flooding back. "It was about our future, I guess. Emily wanted to move to the city, and I wanted to stay here in Maplewood. We were just stressed, that's all." "Stressed enough to make her want to leave?" Thompson pressed. "No!" Jake's voice rose again, desperation creeping in. "She wouldn't just leave. Emily loved this town. She loved me." "Did she?" The detective's voice took on an edge. "You know, we've been looking into your past. You have a history of altercations with a man named Mark. Care to explain that?" Jake's mind raced. Mark had always been a thorn in his side, a bitter rivalry that had escalated over the years. "He's just a guy from high school. We never got along, but he has nothing to do with Emily's disappearance." "Are you sure?" Thompson's tone was sharp, like a knife. "We've heard rumors that Mark might have been seen near your house the night she vanished." Anger surged through Jake. "You can't seriously think I'd hurt her, or that Mark would have anything to do with this. If anything, he's just bitter about old grudges." The detective leaned back, studying Jake closely. "You're not giving me much to work with. I need to know everything. Did Emily ever mention feeling threatened? Did she have any enemies?" Jake shook his head, frustration boiling over. "No, not that I know of. She was happy. She wouldn't have kept secrets from me." "Then why did Sarah mention Emily was upset? Why was she so concerned?" Thompson pressed, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "People don't just vanish without reason, Jake." As Jake struggled to find the words, he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Maybe Sarah doesn't know everything. Emily could have been worried about something else entirely. Something she didn't want to share with anyone. Or something she was hiding from you, Thompson suggested, his eyes narrowing. "You're saying she had secrets?" Jake felt the walls closing in around him. "I don't know. I just want to find her. I want to help." His voice cracked, the desperation evident. The detective studied him for a moment longer before writing down another note. "We're going to need to speak to Sarah again. There's more to this story, and we need to get to the bottom of it." As Thompson walked out, Jake was left alone in the room, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and with every passing moment, the possibility of finding Emily began to slip further away. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting an orange hue over Maplewood, Jake sat in his car, parked outside Sarah's house. He was still reeling from the revelation that Emily had been seeing someone else. The thought gnawed at him, twisting in his gut like a knife. He glanced at his phone, the screen lighting up with an anonymous message that read, The truth will come out. People aren't who they say they are. It felt ominous. A reminder of the tangled web they were caught in. With a deep breath, Jake stepped out of the car and knocked on the door. When Sarah opened it, her smile faltered, replaced by concern as she took in his expression. "Jake, what's wrong?" "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice strained. They moved into the living room, the air thick with tension. Sarah gestured for him to sit, but he preferred to pace. "Did you know about Emily's affair?" he asked abruptly. Sarah's face paled. I had an idea, but I didn't know for sure. She never mentioned any names." She paused, biting her lip. "I thought she was just going through a rough patch. She didn't want to talk about it." "Who is he, Sarah?" Jake's voice was low, almost a growl. "I need to know." "I can't just tell you that," she said, her eyes darting away. "It's not my place." "Your place?" He stopped pacing, turning to face her. "You're telling me that my wife is missing, presumed dead, and you want to keep secrets." "Jake, please. I'm just trying to protect her memory." Sarah's voice rose defensively, but there was a tremor of fear beneath it. Protect her memory, or protect yourself from the truth. He took a step closer, his frustration boiling over. "If you know something, you have to tell me. I need to find her." Okay. She finally relented, tears brimming in her eyes. She was seeing someone. I don't know the details, but I think it was someone we both know. "Who?" Jake pressed, his heart racing. "I can't just say it. You have to understand. It's complicated." There was a long silence, both of them lost in thought until Jake's phone buzzed again. Another message. "You're closer than you think." "Who's sending these?" he muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. "It feels like someone is playing games with us." "Maybe it's someone who knows about Emily's life," Sarah suggested, her brow furrowing. "Someone who's watching us, or someone who wants to keep us from finding her," Jake replied, his mind racing. He was done waiting. "I need to find this guy, whoever he is. He might know what happened." "Jake, be careful. You don't know what you're getting into," Sarah cautioned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be careful," he promised, though the conviction in his voice didn't reassure her. "I have to do this." As they spoke, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced out the window, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. He turned back to Sarah. "Do you have any idea where Emily could have gone to meet him?" "Not really," she admitted, her hands trembling. "But I remember her saying something about a place near the lake. It was a spot she used to go to when she wanted to clear her head." "That could be it," he said, feeling a spark of hope. "I'll check it out." "Jake, wait," Sarah called as he headed for the door. "What if the person she was seeing is dangerous?" Jake paused, turning back to her. "If they are, I need to find them before they disappear too. I can't let that happen." With that, he stepped outside, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. As he climbed into his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. The messages, the secrets, the rumors. Maplewood was becoming a place of shadows and whispers. As he drove toward the lake, his mind raced with possibilities. Who was Emily seeing? What secrets had she kept hidden from him? And why did Sarah seem so reluctant to share what she knew? The questions swirled like storm clouds in his mind, but one thing was clear. He was running out of time, and he needed to uncover the truth before it was too late. The dimly lit bar was filled with the low murmur of conversation and the occasional clink of glasses. Jake sat at the far end, nursing a whiskey, his mind racing with thoughts of Emily. He tried to drown out the noise around him, but the weight of suspicion hung heavily in the air. He couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in Maplewood was whispering about him. Just then, the door swung open, and in walked Mark, his rival, and the man he believed could be involved in Emily's disappearance. "How's it feel to be the town's main suspect?" Jake's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to play games, Mark. I want to talk about Emily." "Ah, the missing girl," Mark replied, his tone shifting to a more serious note. What's there to talk about? She's gone, and you're still holding on to that idea that I had something to do with it. You were seen in town the night she disappeared, Jake shot back, his frustration boiling over. You've had a grudge against me for years. Why should I believe you had nothing to do with this? Mark leaned in closer, his expression turning cold. I didn't touch her, Jake. But you're hiding something. I can see it in your eyes. You're scared, and it's not just because of the police. Jake clenched his fists, the anger bubbling inside him. I'm not scared of you, Mark. I'm scared for Emily. She wouldn't just disappear without a reason. Maybe she wanted to get away from you, Mark sneered. You think she was happy? I've seen the way you two interact. It's not love, it's a cage. Shut up, Jake growled, leaning forward in his seat. You don't know anything about us. Enough, boys. A voice interrupted from behind the bar. It was the bartender, a burly man with a no-nonsense attitude. If you're going to bicker, take it outside. This is a place for drinks, not drama. Jake turned back to Mark, his voice low and dangerous. Just stay away from me and from Emily. I'll find out the truth, with or without your help. Mark smirked. Good luck with that, Jake. Just remember, the truth can be a tricky thing. As Mark turned to leave, Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from Sarah, asking if he had found anything. He quickly typed back, "Meet me at the diner. I have a lead." After finishing his drink, Jake left the bar, the weight of Mark's words still heavy in his mind. He drove to the diner, the neon lights flickering as he parked. Inside, Sarah was already seated at a booth, her eyes scanning the room with concern. "Jake, what happened?" she asked, worry etched on her face. "I just confronted Mark," he replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "He denies any involvement, but I don't trust him. He's hiding something." "Did he say anything useful?" Sarah probed, leaning in closer. "Just more of his usual taunts," Jake sighed. "But I can't shake the feeling that he knows more than he's letting on. We need to dig deeper." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "I was thinking about Emily's hotel reservation. If she was planning to meet someone, that could lead us to the truth." "Right," Jake said, his eyes lighting up with determination. "Let's find out who she was meeting. Maybe it's someone we know." As they spoke, the diner door swung open, and a chill swept through the room. The atmosphere shifted, and Jake felt a shiver down his spine. He glanced over his shoulder, but it was just another customer. Yet, the feeling of being watched lingered. "Let's go to the hotel," Jake said abruptly, standing up. "We need to see that reservation for ourselves." "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, hesitating. "What if we're not ready for what we find?" "We have to," Jake insisted, his resolve hardening. "Emily deserves the truth, and so do we." They left the diner, the night air crisp and filled with uncertainty. As they drove towards the hotel, Jake felt a sense of urgency wash over him. Time was slipping away, and he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the secrets that had led to Emily's disappearance. The hotel lobby was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of cheap carpet cleaner and stale coffee. Jake and Sarah stood by the reception desk, their hearts racing with anticipation. They had decided to investigate the hotel where Emily had made a reservation under a false name. If they could uncover the truth about her mysterious lover, perhaps they could clear Jake's name and bring some semblance of peace back to their lives. "Do you think they'll even give us any information?" Sarah asked, her voice a mix of hope and skepticism. "It might lead us to her. We can't give up now." The receptionist, a weary-looking woman in her 40s, eyed them suspiciously as they approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, tapping her pen against the counter. Yes," Jake cleared his throat. "We're looking for information about a reservation made here a few days ago, under the name Lily Adams." The receptionist paused, her expression unreadable. "I'm not authorized to disclose guest information," she said, her tone flat. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "Please, it's important. This is about a missing person. We think she may have been here." The receptionist's demeanor softened slightly, but she remained cautious. I can't give you any details, but I can check the reservation, she said reluctantly. Thank you, Jake replied, his heart pounding. As the woman typed on her computer, he exchanged a glance with Sarah, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were in this together, for better or worse. After a tense moment, the receptionist looked up. Yes, I see the reservation. It was made for 2 nights, but it was canceled the day before check-in. The name on the reservation was indeed Lily Adams. Did it say who she was coming with? Jake pressed, his voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist shook her head. I'm sorry, I can't provide that information, but I can tell you that the cancellation was done online, and there's no record of a check-in. Frustration washed over Jake. But what if she was here? What if she checked in under a different name? Sir, I really can't help you, the receptionist insisted, her tone firm again. Wait, Sarah interjected, her mind racing. Is there a way to get a receipt? Or any record of payment? That might show us who she was with? The receptionist hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I suppose I could look for a payment method, she finally said, her tone less rigid. But I can't promise anything. As the woman searched, Jake felt a knot of anxiety twist in his stomach. They needed answers, but he could feel the walls closing in. What if we find something? He muttered to Sarah. What if it leads to more questions? Then we'll deal with it, Sarah replied, her voice steady. But her eyes betrayed her worry. We have to know Jake. For Emily. Moments later, the receptionist turned back to them, a puzzled look on her face. There was a payment made under a different name, David Green. It looks like it was for a room on the same night the reservation was canceled. Jake's blood ran cold. David Green? Who is that? I don't know, the receptionist said, shrugging. But he checked in just a few hours after the reservation was made. Can you give us his contact information? Jake asked, urgency creeping into his voice. I'm sorry, I can't do that, she said, her expression hardening again. But you might be able to find him if you check the local records. I suggest you go to the police. Great advice, Jake muttered under his breath, frustration bubbling to the surface. We're already in this mess because of them. As they walked away from the desk, Sarah looked at him, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. What do we do now? We find this David Green, Jake replied, his mind racing. Whatever secrets he's hiding, we need to uncover them. Emily deserves that much. With a renewed sense of purpose, they left the hotel, the weight of unanswered questions heavy on their shoulders. As they stepped into the cool evening air, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to something dangerous, something that could shatter everything they thought they knew. As darkness fell over Maplewood, the tension in the air was palpable. Jake sat in his dimly lit living room, the flickering light from the television casting eerie shadows on the walls. He had been poring over the messages he'd received throughout the day, each one more cryptic than the last. The latest message sent a chill down his spine. Secrets have a way of coming out. Watch your back. He tossed his phone onto the coffee table, frustration bubbling within him. Who is doing this? He muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. Just then, Sarah entered, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. Jake, you need to see this, she said, holding up her own phone. She had been doing her own digging, and it showed. I found something. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What did you find? There's been a series of anonymous messages sent to others in the community, too. They're all connected to Emily's disappearance. She handed him her phone, and he read through the messages, a knot forming in his stomach. This is insane, he breathed, looking up at her. Whoever this is, they're trying to manipulate us. They want us to be afraid. Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed. And it's working. I feel like we're being watched, like someone is always one step ahead of us. She hesitated for a moment before adding, We need to find out who's behind this, Jake, for Emily. Jake stood up, his resolve hardening. You're right, we can't let them control us. But how do we even start? We could talk to people who've received similar messages, Sarah suggested, her eyes brightening. Maybe there's something in common that can lead us to whoever is doing this. Good idea, Jake said, grabbing his jacket. Let's go. If we're going to figure this out, we need to be proactive. As they stepped out into the cool night, a sense of urgency propelled them forward. The streets were mostly quiet, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the stillness. They began their quest at the local cafe, a popular spot where townsfolk often gathered. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with chatter, but Jake and Sarah soon found a secluded table. They approached a woman named Lisa, who had also received a message. "Thanks for meeting us," Jake said, a hint of desperation in his voice. "We're trying to get to the bottom of these messages. Can you tell us what yours said?" Lisa looked around nervously before leaning in closer. "It said something about knowing my secrets and that I should keep quiet if I wanted to stay safe," she whispered. "Safe from what?" Sarah questioned, her tone urgent. "I don't know, but it's terrifying. I haven't told anyone about my past, not even my husband," Lisa replied, her voice trembling. Jake exchanged a glance with Sarah. "You're not alone in this," he reassured her. "We're looking for the person behind these messages. We need to stick together." As they spoke, Jake's phone buzzed again. He checked it, his heart racing as another message appeared, this one more threatening than before. "You're getting too close. Back off, or you'll regret it." "Jake?" Sarah asked, noticing his pale face. "What is it?" He showed her the screen, and her eyes widened in disbelief. "This is getting dangerous," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't let fear stop us. But we also need to be careful." "I know," Jake replied, determination flooding his veins. "But if we stop now, we might lose whatever chance we have to find out what happened to Emily." They left the cafe, the weight of the world on their shoulders. As they walked through the dark streets, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. "We need to head back to my place," he said, his voice low. "I have a few things I want to go over. Maybe we can piece this together." As they reached his house, the quietness enveloped them. Jake opened the door, and they stepped inside, the shadows of the room seeming to loom larger. "Let's check the security footage from last night," Jake suggested, heading to his computer. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "If we can find something, anything, it might lead us to the person sending those messages." As they watched the footage, the tension in the room thickened. The screen flickered, showing the exterior of his house. They fast-forwarded through the images until something caught Jake's eye. A fleeting figure, cloaked in darkness, lingering near his yard on the night of Emily's disappearance. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, pausing the video. "Who is that?" "I don't know," Sarah answered, her heart racing. "But this is definitely a lead. We need to find out who that is." Jake leaned closer to the screen, both excitement and fear coursing through him. "We're getting closer, Sarah. I can feel it." But as the figure remained an enigma on the screen, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Jake and Sarah sat in the dimly lit room of Jake's living room, the glow of the television casting flickering shadows on their faces. They had just reviewed the grainy footage from the security camera, and their minds raced with possibilities. The figure in the video was indistinct, cloaked in darkness, but it was enough to ignite a sense of urgency within them. "I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something," Jake said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "That figure, whoever it is, was there for a reason. We need to find out what happened that night." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We should look for witnesses. Someone must have seen something. We can't let this slip through our fingers." "Right. Let's see if anyone in the neighborhood remembers anything unusual," Jake replied, his voice steadying as he regained focus. They grabbed their jackets and stepped out into the cool evening air, determination propelling them forward. As they walked down the familiar street, the silence of Maplewood felt heavier than usual. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the occasional rustle of leaves was the only sound accompanying their footsteps. They decided to start with a neighbor who had a habit of being particularly nosy, Mr. Thompson, a retired school teacher who seemed to have a keen eye for neighborhood happenings. Knocking on Mr. Thompson's door, Jake felt a mix of apprehension and hope. The door creaked open, revealing the elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose. His eyes narrowed slightly as he recognized Jake and Sarah. "What brings you two here?" Mr. Thompson asked, curiosity piqued. "Mr. Thompson, we're investigating Emily's disappearance," Jake said, keeping his tone serious. "We were hoping you might have seen anything unusual that night. Anything at all could help." Mr. Thompson hesitated, his gaze shifting to the ground as if the very act of speaking would unearth something buried deep within him. "Well, I did see some commotion in the parking lot across the street. Two women were arguing, but I couldn't make out what they were saying." "Do you remember what they looked like?" Sarah pressed, her eyes wide with interest. "Not really. It was dark, but one of them seemed familiar. I thought it might have been Emily, but I wasn't sure," Mr. Thompson said, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "I didn't think much of it at the time." Jake exchanged a glance with Sarah, his heart racing. "Do you remember what time it was?" "Late. I'd say around 10, Mr. Thompson replied, his voice wavering slightly. "I was just about to turn in for the night when I saw them." "Did you see who else was there?" Jake asked, leaning forward, desperate for more information. "No, I didn't. I was too far away to get a good look at anyone else," he admitted, his eyes darting nervously. "But I remember hearing raised voices. It sounded intense." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We appreciate your help," Sarah said, visibly shaken. They stepped away from the door, their minds racing with the implications of what they had just learned. "Do you think Emily was in trouble?" Jake asked, his voice low as they walked back down the path. "Maybe," Sarah replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "If she was arguing with someone, it could mean she was scared or upset. We need to find out who the other woman was. This could be a significant lead." As they strolled back down the quiet street, Jake's mind was ablaze with questions. If Emily was arguing with someone, it could be connected to her affair, but why would she be in an emotional confrontation with another woman? And who was this woman? "Let's keep asking around. Someone has to know something," Sarah suggested. "Right. We'll find out who that woman was, and we'll get to the bottom of this," Jake said, determination fueling their resolve as they continued their search for the truth, the weight of the mystery growing heavier with each step they took. Jake and Sarah sat in the small, cluttered living room of Jake's house, the tension palpable in the air. They had just returned from speaking with the neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who had mentioned a sighting that could be pivotal to their investigation. Yet, something about his demeanor had unsettled them both. He had seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hands and avoiding eye contact. "Do you think he knows more than he's letting on?" Sarah asked, biting her lip as she leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's possible. I could tell he was holding back. People don't get that nervous unless they're hiding something." He glanced towards the window, where the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. "We need to confront him. This could be the break we need." Sarah nodded, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "What if he's just scared? We can't let fear stop us from finding the truth." With a determined look, Sarah agreed. "Okay, let's go back and talk to him. We need to know what he saw." They drove back to Mr. Thompson's house, the weight of their mission hanging heavily between them. When they arrived, they found him sitting on his porch, a glass of iced tea in hand. He looked up as they approached, his expression shifting from surprise to unease. Hi there," he stammered, setting the glass down. "What brings you back?" "Mr. Thompson," Jake said, his voice firm yet calm. "We need to talk to you about what you saw the night Emily disappeared. It's important." The older man shifted in his seat, glancing towards his front door as if contemplating escape. "I told you everything I know," he replied, his voice edging on defensive. Sarah stepped closer, her tone softening. "We understand this is difficult, but if you saw something, anything, it could really help us." He hesitated, clearly torn. "It's just, I don't want to get involved in any of this. You know how people talk in this town." Jake took a step forward, trying to convey sincerity. "This isn't about gossip or rumors, Mr. Thompson. It's about finding Emily. She's missing, and we're desperate for any information you might have." The neighbor sighed deeply, glancing around as if ensuring they were alone. "Fine. I did see something, but you have to promise me that you won't tell anyone I said anything." "Of course," Jake assured him, his heart racing. "What did you see?" "I was out in my yard that night, watering my plants, Mr. Thompson began, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I saw a woman in the parking lot, arguing. I thought it was just a couple having a spat. But then, I realized it was Emily." Jake exchanged a quick glance with Sarah, their hearts pounding at the revelation. "Who was she arguing with?" Jake asked, urgency creeping into his voice. "I couldn't see the other person's face," Mr. Thompson continued, shaking his head in frustration. "But they were really going at it. I thought about intervening, but I didn't want to overstep." "Did you hear anything? What were they arguing about?" Sarah pressed, leaning in closer. The neighbor squirmed, his brow furrowed with anxiety. She seemed upset. "Did you see who was driving?" "No," Mr. Thompson admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it was a dark car. That's all I remember. I swear, I didn't mean to ignore it. I just didn't think it was important." "It is important," Jake insisted, trying to keep his frustration in check. "This could be the key to understanding what happened to Emily. You need to remember anything you can—" The neighbor looked conflicted, his fingers trembling slightly. "I'm sorry. I wish I could help more. I just didn't want to get involved. I hope she's okay." As they left, Jake felt a mix of anger and determination. Someone had been arguing with Emily, and it was clear that the situation had escalated. But who, and why hadn't anyone else seen this? "Jake," Sarah said quietly as they walked to the car, "do you think the argument had anything to do with her disappearance?" "I don't know," he replied, his mind racing, "but it's a lead we can't ignore. We have to find out who she was with that night." As they drove away, Jake felt the weight of the mystery growing heavier. The deeper they dug, the more questions arose, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to something dangerous. As tension-filled days wore on, Jake and Sarah found themselves in an increasingly precarious position. The search for Emily had morphed into a labyrinth of mistrust and buried feelings. Each day brought new whispers of speculation from the townsfolk, and the pressure of unraveling the truth weighed heavily on both of them. One evening, as they sat in Jake's dimly lit living room, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken thoughts. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on the walls, mirroring the uncertainty that loomed over their fragile alliance. Jake ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "Why do you think the neighbor hesitated?" he asked, his voice breaking the tense silence. "He saw something. I know it." "I don't know, Jake," Sarah replied, her tone soft but weary. "People react differently to stress. Maybe he was just scared." Jake leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Or maybe he knows more than he's letting on. I can't shake the feeling that he's hiding something. We need to confront him again." "But what if he gets defensive?" Sarah cautioned, biting her lip. She could feel the tension crackling between them, the unacknowledged feelings simmering just below the surface. "Then we'll deal with it. I'd rather face his anger than live in this uncertainty," Jake replied, his determination palpable. As they plotted their next move, Sarah's heart raced. She was torn between loyalty to her friend and the undeniable pull she felt toward Jake. The way he spoke, the intensity in his eyes, it made her want to reach out, to comfort him. But she knew that their bond was fragile, teetering on the brink of disaster. "Jake," she began hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Of course. What is it? Do you think you'll ever trust me again?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but it sliced through the tension like a knife. Jake leaned back against the couch, his expression shifting. "Trust? I don't know. This whole situation is complicated." He paused, searching for the right words. "I feel like I barely know anyone anymore, including you. I know this is hard, but I want to help you," she replied, her voice steadying. We're in this together, right? He nodded slowly, but the doubt in his eyes was unmistakable. Yeah, together. But I can't help but feel like there's something you're not telling me. Sarah's heart sank. Jake, I swear. Just promise me. If there's something I should know, you'll tell me, he interrupted, his tone turning serious. A silence fell between them, thick with unsaid words. Sarah's mind raced as she contemplated revealing her feelings for him. But now, in the midst of a potential crisis, was it the right time? Jake stood abruptly, his energy shifting as he moved toward the window. He gazed out into the night, the streetlights illuminating the empty road. I just want to find Emily, he muttered, almost to himself. The sincerity in his voice tugged at Sarah's heart. Me too, she said softly, stepping closer. We will find her. We just have to keep pushing forward. But as they prepared to confront the neighbor again, a new wave of anxiety surged through Sarah. What if the truth was too much for either of them to handle? The following day, they returned to the neighbor's house, a sense of urgency propelling them forward. Jake knocked firmly on the door, each thud echoing like a drumbeat of anticipation. The door creaked open, revealing the neighbor, his expression a mix of confusion and apprehension. Hey, Jake, Sarah, he greeted, glancing nervously between them. Can we come in? Jake asked, his tone brokering no argument. The neighbor hesitated but stepped aside, allowing them entry. The interior was cluttered, remnants of a hasty breakfast strewn across the kitchen table. Look, we just need to talk, Jake said, his voice steady. You mentioned seeing a woman argue with Emily. We need to know everything you saw. The neighbor shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Why, it was just a quick thing. I didn't think it was important. But it is important, Sarah interjected, her frustration spilling over. Every detail matters. Please, you have to help us. The neighbor sighed, glancing out the window as if expecting someone to approach. Fine. I saw them arguing in the parking lot, but I didn't know who she was. Jake's eyes narrowed. You said you saw a familiar face. Who? The neighbor's gaze dropped, his voice barely above a whisper. I think it was someone from your circle, but I can't be sure. Jake felt a surge of anger. You can't keep us in the dark like this. If you know something, you need to say it. The neighbor's eyes darted around the room, anxiety evident in his demeanor. I don't want to get involved. You don't know what you're asking. With each passing moment, the tension between Jake and Sarah grew. Jake's determination clashed with Sarah's growing fear of what they might uncover. As the neighbor fumbled for words, Sarah felt a pang of guilt for not revealing her feelings sooner. In that moment, it became clear to both of them. The search for Emily wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about confronting the truths they had buried within themselves. And as they stood there, the air thick with uncertainty, they realized the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. The air in the dimly lit room was thick with tension as Jake stood face to face with Ethan, the man Emily had been seeing. The confrontation had taken place at a secluded cabin in the woods, where Jake had followed a trail of cryptic messages and whispered secrets. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering in the light of a single bulb hanging overhead. Why did you bring me here, Jake? Ethan asked, his voice steady, yet laced with an undercurrent of fear. You think I had something to do with Emily's disappearance? Jake's fists clenched at his sides. I know you were with her. You had to have seen something. Just tell me the truth. Ethan's gaze dropped to the floor, and he sighed heavily. Emily was planning to leave you. She felt trapped, but she was scared, Jake. Scared of what would happen if you found out? What do you mean scared? Jake demanded, his heart racing. What did you do to her? I didn't do anything. It wasn't like that, Ethan replied, his frustration bubbling to the surface. She was trying to find a way out, but she didn't want to hurt you. There were things about your family she found out, things that put her in danger. Jake's mind raced. What things? What did she know? He felt a knot tightening in his stomach, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Your father. He's not who you think he is. Jake, Emily uncovered something connected to your family's business. She was going to expose it, and that's why she was in danger. Jake felt the ground beneath him shift. What are you talking about? What could she have possibly found out? Your father's dealings. They're not just legal. There are people involved who wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens to expose their secrets. Emily was going to go public, Ethan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Jake's voice cracked, the weight of betrayal heavy in the air between them. Ethan's expression softened. Because I didn't think it would come to this. I thought she could handle it. I thought she could find a way to leave without any of this happening. I never wanted her to get hurt. Just then, the door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was Mr. Collins, Emily's former boss. His face was grave, and the moment he saw the two men, he shut the door behind him. We need to talk, he said, his voice a low rumble. Emily was onto something big, and it's not just about her relationship with you, Jake. What do you mean? Jake asked, bewildered by the sudden appearance of the older man. Emily had information that could ruin you, Mr. Collins said, taking a step forward. She discovered financial discrepancies in the company, connections that lead back to your father. She was gathering evidence. Jake shook his head in disbelief. You're lying. She wouldn't have done that. She loved me. Love doesn't protect you from the truth, Mr. Collins replied bluntly. Emily had a secret she was going to reveal, and I tried to warn her. I told her to be careful, but she wouldn't listen. She was determined. Why are you telling me this now? Jake pressed, his pulse quickening. Because I didn't want anyone to get hurt, least of all her. But it's too late now, Mr. Collins said, his eyes darting between Jake and Ethan. People are looking for her. Jake. They want to make sure she doesn't talk. Jake felt the world spinning around him. What does that mean? Are you saying someone kidnapped her? It's a possibility, Ethan interjected, his voice tight with urgency. If she found out about the shady dealings, they might have taken her to keep her quiet. Keep her quiet, Jake echoed, anger rising within him. You mean to kill her? Mr. Collins nodded gravely. We need to find her before it's too late. If she knows too much, they will stop at nothing. Desperation fueled Jake's resolve. Then what are we waiting for? We need to find her. We can't let this go on. Ethan and Mr. Collins exchanged glances, understanding the gravity of the situation. The three of them, once strangers caught in a web of deceit, now had a common goal: to uncover the truth and save Emily before it was too late. As they prepared to leave the cabin, a sense of urgency enveloped them. The stakes were higher than they had ever imagined, and the dark secrets of Jake's family loomed over them like a storm cloud, threatening to unleash chaos on Maplewood. The search for Emily had taken a dangerous turn, and they were running out of time.
Avertissement. Cette chaîne ne soutient ni ne tolère aucune forme de discrimination, de racisme, de préjugés ou de violation des droits humains. Les histoires présentées ici sont originales et créées par l'auteur dans le but de promouvoir la réflexion, la sensibilisation et le dialogue. Tout le contenu est développé dans le respect de la diversité et de la dignité de toutes les personnes.